Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and today I've got a review and discussion of the We Knives 602. Now this is the second model that We Knives released, and this is sent to me for review from 7 Ready Knife Reviews. And so if you're not subscribed to that channel, I will put a link in the description box below. Really cool channel, and if he wasn't the first, he was one of the very early guys to first key in on We Knives and have their 601. And the 601 is a really cool looking blade. It's become very, very popular, and since that time, there's been a number of reviews on it, but I've been following We Knives with some interest. So it was pretty cool to see this review on 7 Ready's channel, as well as he's got another one, maybe the 605, I think is the small knife. In the meantime, I have picked up a We Knife of my own. This is the 608, and I will pull this in for comparison a couple of times through this video. So thanks a lot to 7 Ready for letting me check this out, because I've been, pretty interested in what We Knives is doing and really wanting to check one out for a while now. And so this is a really, really welcomed opportunity to be able to get one of these in hand and kind of see what all the fuss is about. And I will say I was not disappointed. This is a very high quality, well put together folder. And I would say, definitely the value on these I think they usually sell for $285 to $300 depending on the model, and that's fairly reflective of the level of quality and materials that you're getting here. Now, before we switch over to a closer up version or a close up view of this, let me give you the size and weight. So this knife overall is 8 5/8 inches. You can see that it's definitely a full size folder, very hand filling. 3.5 inch blade, 5 1/8 inch handle, and so that's where your 8 5/8 overall comes from. And the weight on this, I'll show you when we're zoomed in a little bit more, but the milling on this is very well done. It's heavily milled out to save some weight, and they do get it down to 5.4 ounces, which is very comfortable to carry. Yes, it's a little heavy, I know, but at 5.4 ounces, anything between 4 and 6 ounces, I figure is a pretty good ballpark. So let's go ahead and switch over to a closer up view of this, and I'll go into some of the details with you. Okay guys, so here we are zoomed in on this 602, and before we get into much else, let me just show you. It's going to ship with this very nicely done pouch, as well as a card from We Knives and the tool to adjust the proprietary hardware. And the tool does work pretty well. I've adjusted the pivot a little bit on my own 608. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the blade the way that we always do, now that I've shown you what this is going to ship with. My 608 came with a cloth, and I don't know if this one did originally and it's just been taken out, or if it didn't actually ship with that. Sorry, I got another knife in frame there. So let's go ahead and start off with this blade, which is a very attractive tanto with sort of I don't know if you'd call it either a light DLC finish or a heavy blackwash finish. You can see, if I compare it to something like my 0200 here, this is a full-on DLC coating. Same with Manix 2XL, again, full-on DLC coating. Notice this coating, though, sort of has, you can see some of the gray coming through. I wouldn't call it a black wash. It's heavier than that. Maybe you could say it's just a heavy black wash. So we've also got this very nice fuller at the top, and I gotta say, I love the way this knife is ground. So the plunge grind here is very precise. Now it is a little angular, so if you're not into that, I could see that putting off some people, because you've got this very abrupt straight line here, one here, one here, one here, one here. So if you're not into that sort of angular blade design, and really the whole knife kind of carries that lined, angular, squared off look throughout. I really like it on the blade. Okay, now it does have the fuller, and you've got some screws in there. And I will say this: the fuller does not serve as an opening mechanism. It barely, you can hardly get your finger on it. Instead, this is definitely an exclusive flipper only. I know we're not talking about deployment, but just to let you know that that portion of blade design is primarily aesthetic rather than functional. But we do have a very attractive grind on this. Nice thin edge geometry on this very high flat grind. Now this sort of secondary grind here at the front reminds me of the 601, right? Where, remember, if you go and look at a picture of the 601, and I'll roll one in here really quickly, you see how that blade, at the very tip of the blade, the grind is sort of a zero grind. This one is not. You still have a secondary bevel for your sharpened edge, but it does share that, you know, we're going out this way and then all of a sudden the grind changes a little. Very functional, very, very strong. Look how that allows so much material out here at the tip. So this is a very strong blade that, and again, I always appreciate when a blade is able to build in to the design a lot of strength without sacrificing cutting performance. And certainly this is a knife that, or this is a blade that is able to do that. So S35 VM blade steel, I don't think I need to say a whole lot about that. Everyone knows that it's sort of the follow-up to S30V, a very, very good blade steel with great edge retention, great corrosion resistance. So nothing too different there. I will say that I am a big fan of this particular blade shape. I really, really do like this. Now, moving down the knife to the pivot, you can see the proprietary hardware there. So you can adjust that with the tool that is included. All right, this is a ball bearing flipper, titanium frame lock. I'll give you, there you go, a closer up view of that lockup, so around 30–40%. Also, if you look back here while we're zoomed in, you can see the lock bar insert, which also functions as an over travel stop. And again, that's pretty much expected on any modern folder and fairly well executed. Again, you do have that proprietary hardware there. Now, in terms of lockup and deployment, it is very, very smooth. Essentially, just what you want. Like it drops nicely under its weight, but it doesn't slam shut like a guillotine on your fingers, right? And that's never fun. To demonstrate a blade that has like zero friction in the pivot, notice, you know, this blade is literally, it's just free hanging. Okay, now I do think that's a pretty cool design feature in this blade, but normally on a higher end titanium frame lock knife, I don't really want to see that, especially because I've got to get my fingers in front of that blade in order to unlock the knife. So very smooth, very nice deployment, with one little issue here, and that is the detent on this is a little soft for my liking. You know, it's not a very snappy blade, and if you want sort of a snappy deployment, you're going to have to put a little wrist into it. Now it'll deploy without that. Notice I can push this fairly softly and it will still deploy. Okay, not quickly, but that does show you how smooth it is. The 608 is just as bad, which maybe indicates to me that in general, WE knives are not, you know, they're not putting a super stiff detent on these. All right, both of these knives kind of remind me of this knife. So if you've got a 0200, you know that it will flip, but you really have to put some effort into flipping that knife out. Compared to something like my Real Steel S571 here, and you know, that's a knife where when the detent breaks, I mean, it just flips flying open, right? That I don't know if someone would like to comment to let us know whether that's a feature of most WE knives or if it just happens to be these two models that I have here in front of me. Now, that's my only issue here with lockup and deployment. Otherwise, it's very good. And of course, I will say, really, really smooth, really, really nice feeling in terms of, you know, actually opening that blade. It just feels really, really good. Let's move on to the handle. Now that we've talked about lockup and deployment, which again, no issues at all, except for that detent could be just a little snappier in my opinion. Maybe there's some of you watching there who like a fairly soft detent, and if that's the case for you, then yeah, you're gonna really appreciate that on this knife. For me, no, I would like it to see it just a little stiffer. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the handle design on this knife. And this is where you're going to get some subjectivity. And I've got to tell you, I'm not a huge fan of the look of this knife. I kind of feel like the blue and green don't go together that well, and you add the purple hardware, and yeah, overall I find this handle is just a little too squared off. I'm not a fan of the line down the middle. I am, however, a fan of the cutouts here, which are carried over onto the pocket clip on this side. And in terms of how this is done, okay, so what I'm commenting on is really just a matter of opinion. I just really don't like the look of this handle. It kind of reminds me of, remember the Riat knives, District 9, one of their early models. I wasn't a big fan of it. And a lot of Reich knives, and I wonder if that's where the inspiration for this came from. A lot of Reich knives have these very angular design features going on, and I'm not a huge fan of it. Now, this knife does have, sort of all of these straight line angular cuts in the 3D machining. Now, outside of that, the fit and finish on this is very, very good. Okay, the only little issue, there are two little things. One is the finger choil here is very squared off. Notice how square that is. And of course your finger is round, which can create a little bit of a hot spot. I've used this a little bit. I haven't gone crazy with it, as it's not my knife. But the only real aesthetic issues I have with it, outside of the looks, are, yeah, this is a little too square for my liking, and there's a bit of a hot spot created by this pocket clip if I'm holding it with my right hand. So right there in the palm of my right hand, the pocket clip does dig in just a little bit. Not terrible, but I tried doing a bunch of fast cuts on some paper and some different things like that, and I noticed a bit of a hot spot there. So again, not the end of the world. Overall, very well done. Certainly when it comes to fit and finish, this knife is fairly exceptional. I want you to try and notice something here. The milling on this is absolutely extensive. They've done a lot of milling, and one of the cool things about this is you see this line of sort of keyholes in the handle. If you look inside the knife, it's hard to notice on camera, and I don't know if I'll be able to show you really or not. Let's see from that side if you can see it. You can sort of see it from this side. See how there's a bit of a pattern you can see there? Well, what's happening there is when they milled this out, they actually, in order to maintain the look of the knife, where it looks like this is one solid piece of titanium, not milled out, they actually left those holes at the full thickness of the titanium and cut around them with the milling on the inside. And that is some pretty impressive attention to detail. Okay, in addition to that, there's a row of jimping right here. There's a bit of jimping down here and up here, and that jimping is perfectly placed, and I would say perfectly cut, right? It's really easy to get jimping either too smooth or too abrasive. And this is, sort of like a Goldilocks level of jimping where it's just right, okay? Really, really well done. Also notice the way they've done the stop pin here. I do appreciate when the stop pin is sort of recessed into both the blade, right? See how that stop pin, you can only see about half of it there. And the same is true when the blade is closed. It's sort of wrapped by the flipper tab there. So that's really well done. And that kind of attention to detail is one of the things that I think you can expect at this price point, and certainly from any high-end folder at this point. I'm looking for those kinds of things, and WE does not fail to deliver that stuff. So all of that is really nicely done. Now let's talk a little about the milled clip. It is nicely done. I think it ties in with the design really well, even though I'm not a huge fan of the design. Now I do like the way the blade drops totally into the handle, and yeah, whether you like the design or not, you have to admit that the pocket clip definitely fits the knife. Okay, now what I want you to notice is the way that they have done this. Notice, let me see. So notice on the 608, you've got your hardware right there holding this milled clip onto the knife. That's fine. That's what you see in a lot of cases, right? I see the same thing here. You see the same thing here, right? Pretty well expected. However, notice this is not really hidden hardware. Normally with hidden hardware, there'd be a screw in this put in from the back. In this case, the construction of the knife actually allows for that pocket clip. Notice if I come in really close, see how the clip is actually slotted out in the handle here, so it actually has to be put in before you put the knife together. And then you do have that really nice lanyard hole at the back since we're looking there. But I love the way that they have attached this clip, right? It allows it to really almost appear as if it was milled out of the same piece of titanium as the handle. It wasn't, and you can tell that it wasn't, but notice how, you know, they just really did a great job sort of implementing that pocket clip into the overall design. And it more than a lot of other clips, it really feels like it's meant to be a part of this knife. So really, really well done. Now that does mean that it's going to be single position. So whatever you want to say about that, you're not going to be able to move that clip. Now, and I don't know, maybe someone again could comment with whether or not WE is doing any left-handed models or not. I certainly haven't heard about any, but it's not like I have some kind of magic knowledge of everything that WE Knives is doing. So yeah, if you know about a left-handed option for any of their models, go ahead and comment below with that. So overall, I think the quality is there, the fit and finish is there. I wish the detent were a little stronger. And let me say this about WE Knives in general. I'm going to pull in the 608 as well. And let me say about WE Knives in general, I wish they would do something just a little more understated. Like the 601, what made it so awesome was, number one, that very different blade grind, but the fact that, you know, it looked, the look was essentially just perfect. There wasn't too much going on, there wasn't too little going on. It wasn't too overstated or too understated. It was just kind of right there. A lot of their other models, and there are a bunch of them out there now, you know, I feel like they haven't quite hit that perfect balance the way that they did with the 601. They do, you know, they do have a lot of milling, a lot of different finishes, all of which adds value. But sometimes you can go too far. You go, hey, we're really good at doing these really cool finishes. That's great, but don't overdo it. All right, so there you go, guys. I'd love to hear your comments and your thoughts about WE Knives down below. If you've got some, let me know what you think of the models that you have, and we will talk to you soon.